All right, you wankers, strap yourselves in, because today we're diving headfirst into a political shit show of epic proportions.
Oh, this is going to be good.
Forget your usual dose of reality TV drama. We're talking Northern Ireland Assembly.
Where the betrayals are real.
The grudges run deeper than a pint of Guinness.
And the stakes are higher than a bookie's odds at a Belfast dog track.
This is a parliament, but with fewer wigs and more likely to erupt into a brawl, am I right?
Spot on. You see, we're talking about a devolved legislature, their own mini parliament, if you will, but one that's saddled with more historical baggage than a Ryanair flight delayed in Dublin.
I'm already hooked. But before we get into the juicy bits, remind me, how the hell did this whole assembly thing even come about?
Right, well, rewind back to 1998, the Good Friday Agreement, remember?
Vaguely.
That was the deal that was supposed to put a stop to the Troubles, decades of bloody conflict that had everyone in Northern Ireland at each other's throats.
Ah, yes, the Troubles. Catholics and Protestants bashing each other's heads in for fun. Not exactly a shining moment for humanity, was it? But I digress. So this assembly was their way of saying, okay, let's try not to kill each other, and maybe even, dare I say it, govern this place together.
Precisely. The idea was to create a government that represented both sides. Unionists who want to stick with the UK and nationalists who dream of a united Ireland.
Right, the eternal struggle. So they thought sticking them in a room together would magically solve everything.
Well, the hope was they'd share power, make laws, and hopefully avoid another civil war. They came up with this whole power-sharing system.
Sounds about as stable as a drunken tightrope walker. Explain.
Basically, it forces the Unionists and Nationalists to work together, whether they like it or not.
Hold up, forced. Are we talking shotgun weddings and arranged marriages here?
In a way, yeah. They set up a system where both sides have to be represented in the government. No one party can just waltz in and call all the shots.
Okay, I'm intrigued. So, how the bloody hell does this power-sharing sausage get made? Break it down for us.
All right, well, they've got a few mechanisms in place. First, there's this thing called the D'Hondt method, which is basically a fancy mathematical formula to divvy up the ministerial positions. Think of it as a complicated way of splitting a pizza based on how many slices each party deserves.
Sounds messy.
Only instead of pepperoni and mushrooms, they're fighting over education budgets and healthcare spending.
Ah, the real meat and potatoes.
Huh?
So it's all about making sure everyone gets a piece of the pie, even if it's a shitty slice.
Exactly. And then there's the cross-community support requirement. For big decisions like electing the speaker or changing the rules, they need a majority of votes from both the nationalist and unionist blocs. No steamrolling allowed.
So a bit of forced compromise built into the system, eh? That's got to lead to some fireworks, knowing these fellas.
Oh, you bet. But wait, there's more. They also have this delightful little thing called the Petition of Concern.
Petition of concern. Sounds awfully polite for this bunch of arseholes. What's the catch?
Think of it as the ultimate fuck you card in Northern Irish politics. Each side can basically veto any legislation they really hate, no matter what the other side wants.
Hold on. A veto. So they set up this whole elaborate system for sharing power, and then give each side a big red button to nuke the whole bloody thing. Brilliant. It's no wonder this assembly has been suspended more times than a teenage driver caught speeding.
You're not wrong. This assembly has seen more stop-start action than a dodgy second-hand car.
Tell me about it. I'm already exhausted just thinking about it.
Well, buckle up, because we're just getting started. We've got a lot more ground to cover in this deep dive into the wonderful world of the Northern Ireland Assembly.
All right, you heard the man. Get comfy, grab a drink, and let's continue our journey into this political clusterfuck.
So let's rewind the clock a bit and take a closer look at the Assembly's track record. Because this whole power-sharing circus hasn't always been this chaotic, you know?
Oh, yeah. You're telling me there was a time when these guys actually managed to keep their shit together? Do tell.
Well, cast your mind back to 1998, the first Assembly elections, hot on the heels of the Good Friday Agreement. Everyone was buzzing, all these bright-eyed politicians ready to make history, usher in a new era of peace and prosperity. But, as you can probably guess, it didn't quite go according to plan.
Well, knock me down with a feather.
Yeah.
Who could have predicted that a bunch of politicians with a history of trying to kill each other might struggle to work together?
Yeah.
So what went wrong? Did they immediately start chucking chairs at each other?
Not quite, but it wasn't far off. They were supposed to get down to business right away, but it took until December of that year for the UK government to actually hand over the reins.
Hang on, so they had this whole election, all this fanfare about a new era, and then they just sat around twiddling their thumbs for 6 months. Typical bloody politicians. Talk about a buzzkill.
It was like they were setting up for a massive rave but forgot to hire a DJ. But even once they finally got the party started, things kept going tits up.
I bet. Give us the gory details. What kind of shenanigans were they up to?
Well, between 1998 and 2002, the assembly was like a car with a dodgy engine, sputtering and stalling, barely managing to move forward. There were suspensions in 2000 and 2001, both triggered by unionist distrust of Sinn Féin and their commitment to the peace process.
It's a shocker.
They basically thought Sinn Féin was still up to their old tricks, plotting and scheming behind the scenes.
So the honeymoon phase was well and truly over. Paranoia and suspicion back on the menu, boys.
Exactly. And then in 2002, the whole thing went completely pear-shaped. The Unionists walked out, accusing Sinn Féin of spying for the IRA. They raided Sinn Féin's offices at Stormont looking for evidence, and it all blew up in their faces.
Hold up, a spy ring. Are we talking James Bond levels of intrigue here?
Not quite, but it was enough to completely shatter what little trust remained between the two sides. The assembly was suspended, then officially dissolved in 2003.
So, back to square one. Did they at least try to patch things up and have another go?
Oh, they tried. There were new elections in 2003, but the DUP and Sinn Féin were still at each other's throats. It took another 4 years of grueling negotiations and a fresh round of elections in 2007 before they finally agreed to share power again.
4 years. Talk about a long and messy breakup. But once they finally kissed and made up, did things actually work this time? Or were they just setting themselves up for another fall?
Surprisingly, yes. From 2007 to 2017, Northern Ireland actually enjoyed a period of relative stability. The Assembly completed its first full term without any major meltdowns. And they even managed to transfer control of policing and justice from the UK government to the Assembly in 2010.
Get out of here. They actually got some shit done. I'm almost impressed. What was the secret to their success? Did they finally discover the magic formula for world peace?
Well, it wasn't quite world peace, but there were a couple of factors at play. For one, both the DUP and Sinn Féin seemed to have matured a bit. They realized that throwing tantrums and walking out every time they disagreed wasn't exactly helping anyone.
So they finally learned to act like grown-ups, eh? Progress. But I'm guessing there was more to it than just a sudden burst of maturity.
Right. They also had a common enemy to unite against, Westminster. Both parties felt they were getting a raw deal from the UK government, and that shared grievance forced them to work together, at least to some extent.
Ah, the old enemy of my enemy is my friend strategy. A classic tale of political expediency. But this period of peace and love couldn't last forever, could it? Tell me the bubble burst eventually.
Of course, you can't keep these guys happy for too long. In 2017, the Cash for Ash scandal exploded, and the whole delicate power-sharing edifice came crumbling down.
Ah, yes. Cash for Ash. A scandal so monumental it almost makes Watergate look like a parking ticket. Remind me what went down again.
It was this ridiculously flawed renewable energy scheme set up by the DUP that ended up handing out millions of pounds to businesses with zero oversight. It was a complete and utter shit show, a textbook example of how not to run a government program.
Free money for everyone. What could possibly go wrong? It's amazing these guys ever managed to get anything built with all the money they were pissing away.
It was a major embarrassment for the DUP, and Sinn Féin, never once to miss an opportunity, seized the moment to call them out for their incompetence and walked out of the government.
Classic Sinn Féin, always ready to pounce when they smell blood in the water. So, back to political gridlock. The same old song and dance.
Yep. The assembly was suspended again, and it took 3 years of agonizing negotiations to cobble together a new government in 2020.
But that one didn't last long either, did it?
Yeah.
What was the excuse that time? Another scandal? Another Brexit-induced meltdown?
You guessed it. The DUP were still pissed off about the Northern Ireland Protocol and used it as an excuse to collapse the assembly in 2022.
Fiercely. Again. These guys are like a couple who keep breaking up and getting back together, only to break up again over the same damn issues. It's exhausting just watching them.
It is a rather tiresome cycle, but this time there was a new twist. The 2022 elections saw Sinn Féin emerge as the largest party in the Assembly.
Hold the phone. You're telling me Sinn Féin, the party that wants to kick the Brits out of Ireland, are now calling the shots in Northern Ireland? That's got to be sticking in the craw of the Unionists.
Oh, you can bet it is. It's thrown a real spanner in the works and made the whole power-sharing dynamic even more complex and unpredictable.
So what's the current state of play? Is the Assembly back up and running, or are they still locked in a political deathmatch?
Well, they managed to form a new government in early 2024, but it's anyone's guess how long it will last. The underlying tensions are still simmering away, and it wouldn't take much to spark another crisis.
Right, so we've covered the history of this political roller coaster. Now let's get down to the nitty-gritty of the parties involved. Who are these characters, and what do they actually stand for? All right, so we've got this assembly, this Frankenstein's monster of a parliament, cobbled together from unionists and nationalists, all trying to share power without tearing each other's throats out. Let's meet the mad scientists behind this experiment, the political parties themselves. First up, the big dogs, the DUP. Who are these guys and what makes them tick?
The DUP are the ultimate defenders of the Union. They see themselves as the guardians of Northern Ireland's Britishness, the ones who'll fight tooth and nail to keep it from going green.
So basically they're the stiff upper lip, God save the king, no surrender types, the kind who'd rather drink lukewarm tea than a pint of Guinness.
Pretty much. They're socially conservative, staunchly Protestant, and deeply suspicious of anything that even hints at Irish nationalism.
And who's their fearless leader?
Ah, yes. They're led by Geoffrey Donaldson, a man who looks like he'd be more at home sipping sherry with King Charles than mixing it up with the rough and tumble of Northern Irish politics.
Don't let the posh accent fool you, though. These guys are political pit bulls. They've brought down the assembly more times than I've had bad takeaways, all in the name of defending their version of Ulster.
True. They've shown they're willing to play hardball to get what they want, even if it means paralyzing the government and pissing off everyone else in the process.
Right. Enough about the DUP. Let's talk about their arch nemesis, Sinn Féin. What's their story? Are they still as radical as everyone makes them out to be?
Sinn Féin are the revolutionaries.
Here we go.
The ones who want to tear down the whole bloody system and build a united Ireland from the ashes.
Ambitious.
They were the political wing of the IRA, though they claim to have renounced violence these days.
Right, sure, and I've got a bridge to sell you.
They're led by Michelle O'Neill,
I've heard of her.
a woman who looks like she could charm the birds from the trees, but wouldn't hesitate to give you a verbal lashing if you crossed her.
Sounds like my type of woman. So, are we talking hardcore Irish Republicans here? The kind who sing rebel songs at funerals and wave the tricolor at every opportunity?
That's one side of them for sure. But they're also savvy political operators. They know how to work the system, how to build alliances, and make compromises when necessary to get closer to their ultimate goal.
Right, so we've got the two big beasts constantly battling it out. What about the smaller parties? Are any of them worth their salt, or are they just along for the ride?
Well, you've got the UUP and the SDLP, the more moderate unionists and nationalists. They're like the sensible but slightly dull neighbors everyone ignores.
Yeah, we've all got those.
They're the middle ground, always trying to find common ground between the two extremes.
Yeah, good luck with that. It's like trying to mediate a peace treaty between a pack of rabid dogs and a swarm of angry bees. Any other interesting characters in this political menagerie? Anyone with a bit of backbone?
The Alliance Party is one to watch. They've been gaining ground in recent elections, appealing to voters who are sick and tired of the same old sectarian squabbles. They're like the cool kids in school, the ones who rise above the petty drama and focus on things that actually matter.
So they're the voice of reason in this asylum, the ones
Yeah.
trying to bring a bit of sanity to the madness.
Exactly. They focus on practical issues, bread and butter concerns that affect everyone in Northern Ireland, regardless of their background or political affiliation.
All right, fair play to them. But let's be honest, does anyone really believe this power-sharing thing can actually work in the long run? Isn't it just delaying the inevitable explosion?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? The Assembly is a testament to the fragile peace that exists in Northern Ireland. It's a reminder that progress is possible, but it requires constant effort, compromise, and a willingness to let go of old grudges. Whether these politicians are capable of that, well, that remains to be seen.
Well said. It sounds like Northern Ireland is in for another bumpy ride. But hey, that's what makes it so damn interesting, right? This is a political drama that never fails to entertain. So to all you listeners out there, buckle up, grab a pint of Guinness, or a cuppa if you're so inclined, and watch the show. Who knows what fresh hell awaits us? That's it for our deep dive into the Northern Ireland Assembly. Thanks for listening, you lot.